Hello guys, welcome back to narsicloud.com. In our last video, we have gone through the API gateway concepts, and we have talked about the architecture of API gateway and what's the purpose and the problem it's solving in in AWS. So today we'll quickly demo creating a new endpoint using API gateway, and we'll call that endpoint and see how API gateway is helping us. Okay. So let's dive into the concept. So if we go to the services here, we have API gateway, and so go to the APIs. So here we have custom domain names and VPC links. So they are different concepts, but today let's focus on the endpoint. So here you got different types of endpoints. So let's focus on creating REST API. Okay. So if we say import, Amazon will give you the basic template using Swagger, so you can quickly try out the concept. Okay, so what it says, to create your first API, we have pre-populated the import form with a pet store API defined using Swagger 2.0. To get started with this, so they defined a Swagger template where they created sample endpoints, so it's easier to import and quickly spin up a new service. So example API, and then let's go here. So endpoint regional, and fill in warnings, import. So if you look at here, we just imported a new resource and methods, which is going to create the get endpoint, get pets, and the pet ID. Okay. So if you want to look at the details, this is the resource. So if you into the resource, you can look at the details here. The method request and integration request is type of HTTP, and it's calling this endpoint. So basically what happens is API gateway, like I explained in my previous video, API gateway will give you these, it will take care of these HTTP details, HTTP level layer, where it will give you the layer of all those HTTP methods, and from that you could connect to another endpoint, another Lambda service, or any other HTTP service. But API takes care of the scalability of handling this HTTP layer. Okay. So in this case, what it does, it's integration request is of type HTTP, the path ID, and it's calling this endpoint, and then integration response, method response, right? So if you look at integration request here, you got different types of integration types. It could be Lambda function, HTTP mock, another AWS service, or it could be VPC link, right? Or it could be HTTP proxy integration. So it will be proxied to your HTTP endpoint. So if you look at this is the endpoint URL, right? So this is the URL it's calling. So what Amazon gave us is the sample and the Swagger file, which has this two endpoints, and it's calling this guy. Okay. So let's get back to, I mean, these are all regular HTTP URL path parameters that you pass in here, and it's taking from, it's matching to that the pet ID. Okay. So let's get back to our demo. So, and whatever the response that you get from HTTP endpoint, you get it will integrate that here, and it will send it back to the client. Okay. So if you want to test that, so the path ID, the path is the pet ID. So let's say we give 1, and give 1 here, you got response back. So it's saying ID 1, the type dog, the price is 249. So this is the sample response that they give, some hard-coded response. But the concept is you quickly created this endpoint, right? So now if I want to call this from outside, let's see how we can do that, right? That's what we want. So right now, after creating this endpoint, what's happening, if you remember our previous demo, you got this some HTTP service, and then you got and you got HTTP layer, right? And here this is called the HTTP endpoint layer, and we're calling this. So if you want to call from the browser, let's take the endpoint. So if you want to create a stage, let's say dev. If you want to do that, first you want to deploy that API. Okay. So what we're doing now is we just created a resource and we're deploying to a new stage. Let's say this is dev stage. Deploy. So now you got this endpoint. This is the public endpoint, right? Let's go back to the. If you look at this, and here let's try with 1. See what happened? So we got this URL. So this URL is pointing to your API gateway, right? It's taking that. That's where the HTTP layer comes into picture. This is the layer, and then when we call this endpoint, what's happening behind the scenes? It is taking that request depending on the configuration here. So this is the endpoint we call, right? This is the endpoint, and then based on the configuration, it passes your request to the configured endpoint. So it could be endpoint, it could be Lambda, it could be proxy, it could be any HTTP service, and you get the response back. So even the response, you got so many details that you can add your integration response and figure out, depending on the response type, what you want to do with that before you serve it to the client. Okay, so that is a quick demo of creating the REST endpoint, and we did that by importing the Swagger file, but you can also create a new endpoint. For example, here I can go ahead and create any endpoint like put, because we already have other endpoints here, right? So and then if you do that, so here you can specify the HTTP. Let's say if it is HTTP, then you can do that. It's a HTTP method put, and if you want to do that as a get, HTTP as api.google.com, something like this, right? So you can create this endpoint. So what's happening is we call this put, and then you're doing something and you're passing it to get. I mean, it doesn't make sense as per norms. Put is pointing to some get endpoint, but just to prove the concept that this is how you can create these types of methods. Okay, so if you want to delete that, then you can delete that method. So yeah, and then you got stages here. Stages, we deployed the resource to dev, and then this gave us some endpoint, right? And then in the same time, you can also create a new stage where you can take this, and then when you want to promote those changes. So after deploying to dev, you know that after you're testing your services, then you're good to go with dev, and then you want to promote that to next stages. So let's say in our case it's prod. You can select the deployment and then promote that to prod. So right now you got 2 different stages. So here this is prod. So if you look at the endpoint here, it is the same API gateway, but with a different stage. So if you go to dev, same thing, but it's just pointing to dev stage. So that's how you promote your code. When you're deploying through API gateway, you deploy to the lower environments first, and then within the same gateway you just promote to prod. so that you're not tampering up with the deployable when you are promoting to prod. Okay, it's quick and easy, and you can avoid a lot of issues if you do like this. So this is the quickest and the manual way of creating the endpoint, and how you promote to different stages. So if you go to authorizer is something that, for example, so in our case we created this endpoint, right? What if I want to add some authentication type here? For example, in the method request, if you see, authorization is none. So here I can select IAM type, or if you have authorizers, you can specify authorizer function there. Okay, so for that we need to first create a new authorizer. This could be an authorizer, could be a Lambda or Cognito, right? So if it is Lambda, then you can specify Lambda function. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, it's intuitive. So you just give Lambda on and invoke role, all those details, and then gateway responses, different types of responses. You can for example, here you can configure all of that based on the responses. When you call this endpoint, it will update that, it will streamline that response and give it back to the client. Okay, so that's a pretty quick introduction of how you create an endpoint and how do you call that. In real time, you do this by using AWS SAM, or it could be another serverless framework, so you don't ever create this manually. You will always do that by CI/CD. So we'll get into all of those details in the later videos, but this is all about API gateway, and it will help us to scale service. There is no limits to that. Okay, so that's all, guys, for today. If you like this video, please click on like button, and please do subscribe, and we in our next video we'll meet up with a new concept. Okay, take care, bye.